She jumped into the wrong car to save herself. She never imagined that mistake would change both of their lives forever. She jumped into the wrong car, thought it was a robbery, but her reaction stunned the millionaire. Welcome to Billionaire Stories Untold. If you enjoy deeply emotional stories of redemption and true love, please subscribe and hit the bell. Now, let us dive into the untold story that changed everything. And let us go back to our main character. Rain hammered the streets of Los Angeles, turning every light into a smear of gold on wet asphalt. A black sedan slowed near the curb, its engine humming low beneath the storm. Maya Torres sprinted out from under the café awning, clutching her worn leather bag to her chest. Her phone screen flickered with the rideshare notification. "Your driver is arriving." She saw the car's headlights flash once, the same make and color she had ordered. Without thinking twice, she yanked the back door open and slid inside, rainwater dripping from her hair. "Drive," she gasped, her voice trembling. "Please, just go." The man behind the wheel froze. His hand tightened around the steering wheel. "Excuse me." She turned toward him, eyes wide with fear. "Do not hurt me. Take whatever you want, just let me out alive." For a second, the only sound was the storm hammering the windshield. Then he blinked, confused. "Miss, I am not robbing you." Her pulse thundered in her ears. She looked around. The car interior was spotless, the dashboard glowing with a quiet blue light. No rideshare sticker, no meter running. She had just broken into someone's private car. "Oh my God," she whispered, mortified. This is not my ride." The man let out a breath somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. His voice was calm, slightly amused. "Apparently not. I am so sorry," Maya stammered. "I thought there was a car just like this parked out front." "It happens," he said, still watching her with curious eyes. "Do you want me to drive you anyway?" "It is pouring out there." She hesitated, glancing at the rain. Her coat was soaked through, her shoes squeaked when she moved. But pride won over comfort. "No, thank you. I have already made enough of a scene." She reached for the door handle, but her fingers trembled so much she fumbled with it. The stranger leaned slightly, opening it for her. "There," he said softly. "You are safe now." Maya managed a shaky smile. "Thank you. And sorry again for, thinking you were a criminal." The corner of his mouth curved upward. "You would be surprised how often that happens." She stepped out into the rain, pulling her coat tighter. The car's taillights glowed red as it pulled away, disappearing into the blur of water and city lights. Maya exhaled, trying to laugh at herself, but embarrassment burned behind her eyes. What kind of woman mistakes a millionaire's luxury sedan for a rideshare? Across the intersection, the driver, Elias Grant, glanced in his rearview mirror. Her reflection lingered there, small and soaked but stubbornly composed. Most people would have screamed or run. She had apologized instead. "Interesting," he murmured under his breath, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The storm swallowed his words as the car merged into traffic. Somewhere behind him, Maya's sketchbook had slipped from her bag and landed on the seat. Its pages fluttered open with the air vent's breeze, charcoal drawings of city streets, old diners, and faces filled with life. Elias noticed it only when he parked in his penthouse garage. He picked it up carefully, tracing a finger over the smudged lines and her signature in the corner. M. Torres. A raindrop slid from his sleeve onto the paper. He wiped it gently, still staring at the sketches. "Well, Miss Torres," he murmured, "maybe this wrong ride was meant to happen." Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline as the city lights flickered like stars drowned in rain. And, somewhere in that storm, two lives had just collided by mistake, by fate, and by something neither of them could yet understand. The next morning, sunlight pushed through the curtains of Maya's tiny studio apartment, lighting up the cracked paint and half-finished sketches taped to the wall. She sat at the small wooden desk by the window, trying to focus on a freelance poster design. But her mind kept circling back to last night, the rain, the car, and that man's calm voice saying, "You are safe now." She shook her head and muttered to herself, "Way to go, Maya, mistake of the year." Outside, the city was already alive. Horns blared, people hurried down the sidewalks, and somewhere far above, the rich were having their morning coffee on rooftop terraces. Maya wrapped her hands around a chipped mug, sipping coffee that tasted mostly like instant regret. Bills were piled on the corner of her desk. Rent was due in 5 days. The cafe where she had worked for almost 2 years had closed down last week, and no one was hiring a barista who also tried to be an artist. Her phone buzzed with a job alert for a new cafe downtown. She hesitated only a second before grabbing her sketchbook and heading out. Across the city, Elias Grant leaned against the glass wall of his penthouse, watching the traffic below. He should have been getting ready for a board meeting, but his thoughts were stuck on something else, the sketchbook he had found in the back seat of his car. He opened it again. Each page was alive with charcoal drawings of Los Angeles, the kind of beauty that came from someone who had lived its chaos, not just admired it from above. The last page showed a rainy street corner, exactly like the one where she had jumped into his car. He smiled to himself. "Find her," he told his assistant when she called to confirm the morning meeting. "I want to return something she left behind." Later that afternoon, Maya walked into the Brew District, a cozy cafe filled with indie music and the smell of roasted beans. She filled out the short application, her sketchbook resting on the counter beside her. The manager, a woman with kind eyes, glanced at it. "You draw." "Just a hobby," Maya said quickly. "Nothing serious." "Looks serious to me," the manager said with a smile. "We could use someone creative around here. You can start tomorrow." Relief hit her like a wave. It was not much, but it was a start. That evening, as she was cleaning the counter, the doorbell chimed softly. She looked up and froze. Standing in the doorway, dressed casually in a gray jacket and jeans, was the same man from last night, Elias. For a second, the world seemed to go quiet. He looked around, his gaze warm but searching. Then his eyes landed on her. "Miss Torres?" Her voice caught in her throat. "You again." He stepped closer, holding up her sketchbook. "You forgot this." Maya's heart skipped. "You found it." "I did," he said, setting it gently on the counter. "You have talent. These are not just drawings. They are moments. You see things most people miss." She blushed, half embarrassed, half flattered. "You looked through them." "I did," he admitted. "I hope that is not a problem." "No," she said quietly. "It is just unexpected." He smiled. "Then let me buy a coffee to make up for the scare I gave you last night." "You mean the scare I gave you," she said, laughing softly despite herself. Elias nodded, amused. "Fair enough." He ordered a black coffee and took a seat near the window. Maya made his drink carefully, trying to ignore the strange flutter in her chest. When she brought it over, he looked up. "You work here now?" "First day," she said. "It is not much, but it is honest work." "I like that," he said. Honesty. There was something about the way he said it steady, thoughtful, that made her look at him longer than she should have. But before she could ask anything else, a co-worker called her from behind the counter. She excused herself and turned away. Elias watched her go, the corners of his lips lifting slightly. He had met thousands of people through his company, but this woman, this accidental intruder, had more authenticity in one nervous smile than most of them had in a lifetime. As he left the cafe, the rain began again, light and steady against the glass. Maya glanced out the window, watching his car disappear into the traffic, unaware that the stranger she had mistaken for a robber was one of the city's most influential millionaires. And somewhere deep inside, both of them felt it, the strange pull of fate that had started with one wrong car, and a moment neither of them could forget. The next few days passed quietly, though neither of them could stop thinking about that brief meeting in the cafe. For Maya, it had felt like a strange dream. Every time she wiped a table or served a customer, she caught herself glancing toward the door, half expecting him to return. For Elias, it was the same. The image of her standing behind the counter, with that nervous but sincere smile, stayed in his mind longer than he cared to admit. He had spent years building companies, predicting trends, and calculating human behavior. But there was something about Maya Torres that refused to be reduced to logic. She was unpredictable, unpolished, and absolutely real. One evening, after a long meeting at Vion headquarters, Elias found himself driving without a destination. The city lights blurred across his windshield until he realized where he had ended up, the Brew District, the cafe where she worked. He parked, walked inside, and saw her right away. She was closing up, humming softly as she cleaned the espresso machine. The sound stopped as soon as she noticed him. "Mr. Grant," she said, surprised. "You are back. I was in the neighborhood," he said casually, though both of them knew that was not true. "Thought I would get another coffee." She smiled, a little uncertain but warmer than before. "You must really like our coffee." He looked at her for a moment. "It is growing on me." When she handed him the cup, he noticed the smudge of charcoal on her wrist. "Still drawing?" he asked. "A little," she said, "when I have the time." "You should not stop," he replied. "The world needs people who see beauty in ordinary things." Maya blinked, caught off guard by the kindness in his tone. "That is nice of you to say, but beauty does not pay rent." He smiled softly. "Maybe not yet." Before she could ask what he meant, her coworker called from the back, asking for help with the register. She excused herself again, leaving Elias alone at the counter. His eyes drifted to the corkboard on the wall, covered with notes, sketches, and small flyers. Among them, one drawing stood out, a quick pencil sketch of the cafe window, signed M. Torres. He took out his phone and snapped a photo. The next morning, Elias brought the picture to his office. An idea had started forming in his mind, something that might bridge the world he knew with the one she dreamed about. He called his head of community relations. "I want to launch a city art initiative, something about how ordinary people see Los Angeles, find local artists, start with independent cafes." His assistant paused. "That is new for you, sir." Elias looked out the window. So is she. Meanwhile, Maya's week grew heavier. Tips were small. Her landlord left another notice about rent, and the art supplies she used were almost gone. One night she sat at her desk, sketching with the last of her charcoal. The drawing was of a man sitting by a cafe window, his face half in light, half in shadow. She stared at it for a long time, realizing it looked like him. The next afternoon, flyer appeared on the cafe counter. "City Through Your Eyes, a local art exhibit, sponsored by Vion." "Looks fancy," said her coworker. "You should join, Maya. You are an artist." Maya shook her head. "They want professionals, not baristas with pencils." But that evening, Elias returned once more, dressed more casually this time, holding a takeaway cup. "You should apply," he said when he noticed her looking at the flyer. She laughed nervously. "How do you know I was even thinking about it?" "I just know the look of someone doubting herself," he said. "You have talent, Maya. Do not hide it because life has been unfair." Her throat tightened. No one had ever said something like that to her before. "What if I fail?" "Then fail beautifully," he said with a gentle smile. "At least you will have tried." That night, after closing, Maya stared at the flyer again. The city outside was alive, glowing through the glass, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of possibility. In another part of that same city, Elias was looking at her sketchbook again, running his hand across the worn cover. He did not know why this mattered so much, but he felt it in his chest, the certainty that he wanted to see her succeed, not because of who he was, but because of who she could be. Neither of them realized it yet, but the wrong car had led them to exactly the right place. A week later, Maya stood outside the downtown art center, clutching her portfolio like it was a lifeline. The wind was colder than usual, the kind that carried the scent of rain and nerves. She had almost turned back twice already, but Elias's words echoed in her mind. "Then fail beautifully." Inside, the lobby buzzed with people carrying frames, sculptures, and paintings twice her size. She felt completely out of place. When it was her turn to register, She handed over her sketchbook and a few selected drawings, her hands trembling. The woman at the desk looked at them for a long moment, then smiled. Raw, emotional, authentic, I like it. Those 3 words felt like oxygen. That night, Maya went back to work at the café, her head full of cautious hope. She told herself not to expect anything. People like her did not get into exhibitions sponsored by companies like Vion. But deep down, she was already imagining what it would feel like to see her art hanging on those bright white walls. Across the city, Elias was reviewing the final list of artists submitted for the event. When he saw her name near the bottom, Maya Torres, he allowed himself the smallest smile. He had made sure the judging was fair, but her art had earned its place without his help. He looked at her sketch of the rainy street again, the one that had started it all, and whispered to himself, "You did it, Maya." The following week, the cafe was busier than ever. Flyers for the upcoming exhibit were on every table, and customers talked excitedly about the event. Maya tried to stay focused, but her stomach twisted with anticipation. She did not tell anyone she had been selected. It felt too fragile to say out loud. Then, one afternoon, Elias walked in again. This time he was not alone. A few people from his company trailed behind him, carrying tablets and folders. Maya blinked, surprised. "You brought an audience today." "They wanted to see what real community looks like," Elias said, smiling. "I told them it starts with people like you." She laughed softly, unsure how to respond. "You really think that?" "I do," he said. "You reminded me why I started all this. It was never just about profit." When he left, one of her co-workers leaned close. "Who was that guy?" "He talks like he owns the world." Maya just shrugged, though a part of her already suspected the truth. His quiet confidence, his choice of words, even the way people deferred to him, it all pointed to something much larger than she had imagined. But before she could piece it together, the cafe manager called out, "Maya, there is a letter for you." She wiped her hands and opened it. Inside was a simple invitation printed on thick cream paper. "Congratulations. Your work has been selected for the City Through Your Eyes exhibit." Her knees went weak. She had made it. The night of the exhibit arrived faster than she expected. The art center glowed under a canopy of lights, and the crowd inside shimmered with elegant dresses and tailored suits. Maya felt invisible among them, wearing a borrowed black dress and shoes a size too small. She found her corner and froze. Her drawings were displayed in a perfect line, lit gently from above. The sign beside them read, "Moments of the Everyday" by Maya Torres. She was still staring when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "I told you the world would see it one day." She turned slowly. Elias stood there, dressed in a dark suit, his tie slightly loosened, looking more human than powerful. "You came," she said softly. "I would not miss it," he replied. "These are beautiful." "Thank you," she said, her heart thudding. "I almost did not submit them." "I am glad you did." A photographer approached to take pictures of the participants, and she hesitated. Elias gestured toward the display. "You should stand by your work. It deserves to be remembered." When the camera flashed, Maya saw something in his eyes, a quiet pride that went beyond admiration. It was recognition. She wanted to ask him who he really was, what he truly did, but the noise around them grew louder. A voice from the stage announced, "Please welcome our special guest tonight, the founder and CEO of Vion Technologies, Mr. Elias Grant." Maya turned in disbelief. The man standing beside her walked calmly to the stage as applause erupted. Her heart stopped. The stranger she had once accused of being a robber was one of the most powerful men in the city, and she was standing in an exhibit made possible by his company. For a long moment, she could not move. Then, as the applause continued, she whispered to herself, "What have I done?" But deep down, beneath the shock and confusion, something else stirred an understanding that their story was far from over. The applause still echoed when Elias stepped down from the stage. Cameras followed him, reporters leaned forward, and sponsors reached to shake his hand. But all he saw in the crowd was her. Maya stood frozen near her drawings, her face pale with disbelief. He approached slowly, careful not to draw attention. When he finally reached her, she spoke first, her voice low and trembling. "You are the CEO of Vian." He nodded. "Yes." Her eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "You knew all along, did you not? You knew this was your event. You let me talk like I had a chance." "Maya," he said quietly, "you did have a chance. You earned it. I never changed a single vote. You were chosen because your work spoke louder than anything I could have said." She stepped back, shaking her head. "You should have told me who you were. I thought you were just someone normal." "I am normal," he said. But the words sounded hollow even to him. "Normal people do not have buildings named after them," she said bitterly. Elias took a deep breath. "You saw me before the title, before the money. Do you know how rare that is?" Her voice cracked, and now it feels like a trick. Before he could respond, a woman in a sleek gown walked up to him. "Mr. Grant, the investors are waiting for you." Elias gave a small nod, but his eyes never left Maya. "I will be right there." She turned away before he could say more. The applause began again as another speaker took the stage, but Maya barely heard it. Her chest felt tight, her vision blurred. The room was too bright, too polished, too unreal. She slipped out through a side door into the cool night air. Rain had started again, gentle and persistent, soaking her hair and dress. She did not care. She walked down the steps, past the row of luxury cars, and kept walking until the sound of the gala faded completely. Back inside, Elias searched for her. When he could not find her among the crowd, he stepped out into the rain. He spotted her across the street, standing under a flickering streetlight. For a moment he hesitated, then crossed over. "Maya," he called softly. She turned, her eyes glistening. "Do you always save people just to make yourself feel better?" He froze. That is not what this was. "Then, what was it?" she asked. "Was it charity? Pity? You gave me a stage I did not ask for." "I gave you a chance to be seen," he said, his voice firm now, "because you deserve to be." She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that hides tears. "You still do not get it. People like me are invisible until someone like you decides we are worth looking at, and when you are done, we disappear again." Elias felt every word cut deep. "You think that is all I see you as? Another project? I do not know what to think anymore," she said softly. "You live in a world I will never belong to." He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he had never felt more human than when he was with her. But her eyes were already full of the finality he feared. She stepped back, the rain between them. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Grant, but I cannot be part of your story. Not like this." He reached for her hand, but she turned and walked away into the downpour. The streetlight flickered once more, then went dark. Elias stood there, soaked and silent, watching her disappear into the city that had brought them together and now pulled them apart. Back in her small apartment, Maya set her wet sketchbook on the table. The pages rippled with water, smudging the charcoal, lines until every drawing looked like a blur of rain. She sat there for a long time, listening to the storm outside. In the distance, sirens echoed, cars splashed through puddles, and the city went on as if nothing had happened. But for Maya, everything had changed. The man she thought was ordinary had turned out to be extraordinary, and somehow that made him feel even farther away. For Elias, the night stretched endlessly. He drove through the city without direction, every light reminding him of her voice, her eyes, her words. For once, the man who had everything could not fix the one thing that mattered most. He whispered to himself, "What good is success if it costs me the one person who saw me before the world did?" And, for the first time in years, Elias Grant felt completely alone. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between them grew into a wall neither dared to cross. The art exhibit had come and gone, and though Maya's name appeared in magazines and local interviews, she took no joy in it. Every time someone congratulated her, she heard his voice in her head, "You deserve to be seen." But all she could think was that she had been seen for the wrong reasons. Back at the café, she kept her head down, pretending life had gone back to normal. The regular customers smiled, but she rarely looked up from the counter. At night, when the café lights dimmed, she would stay behind, sketching quietly by the window. Yet, every time her pencil touched the paper, the lines blurred into his face. Elias, on the other hand, buried himself in work. The headlines celebrated the success of Vian's new initiative, but behind the corporate triumph, he felt emptier than ever. His penthouse was filled with art pieces and awards, but it all felt meaningless now. The city looked smaller from his window, just a maze of lights that led nowhere. One night, while reviewing quarterly reports, he found the sketchbook again. The pages were worn, a few, still water-stained from the night she walked away. On the last page, tucked behind a folded receipt, was a small drawing he had not noticed before, a quick pencil sketch of him sitting in the café, half smiling, unaware he was being drawn. He closed the book and stood abruptly. For the first time in weeks, Elias knew what he needed to do. The next morning, Maya arrived at the café to find an envelope taped to the door. Her name was written in neat handwriting. Inside, there was an invitation printed on textured paper, "The Art of Every Day," featuring works that changed how we see the city. At the bottom, in smaller letters, was a handwritten note. "One piece of yours deserves a second look. E.G." Her heart thudded. She tried to tell herself not to go, that she was done being part of his world. But that night, something inside her whispered that maybe closure was not found by hiding. The following evening, she walked into the small downtown gallery listed on the Clute invitation. It was quiet, warm, filled with the soft sound of a jazz record playing in the background. Her breath caught when she saw it. The main piece displayed in the center of the room was one of her drawings, enlarged and framed in glass. It was the sketch of the rainy street, the moment she had jumped into the wrong car. Beneath it was a brass plaque that read, "Chance is just another word for fate." She turned slowly, and there he was, standing near the corner, hands in his pockets, eyes soft but uncertain. "Elias," she whispered. "I did not change your work," he said quickly. "I just gave it the space it deserved. This entire gallery is for local artists. It was your idea, you just did not know it." She blinked, tears threatening. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I cannot undo what I did wrong," he said. "But I can make sure the world knows you for who you really are. Not as someone I helped, but as someone who inspired me." Maya stepped closer. "You do not owe me anything." "Maybe not," he said quietly. "But I owe myself honesty. You made me see that all the success in the world means nothing if you forget why you started." Her throat tightened, but she managed a whisper. "And why did you start?" He smiled faintly. "To build something that makes life better. Tonight, that something is standing right in front of me." The words hung in the air between them. The lights reflected in her eyes, and for the first time since the gala, she did not look away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The music swelled softly, and the rain outside began again, tapping against the windows like a heartbeat that had found its rhythm. Maya looked at the framed drawing one last time, then back at him. "Maybe fate does have a strange sense of humor," she said quietly. "Maybe," Elias replied, "but I am grateful for it." She did not answer, only smiled a small, real smile that reached her eyes. And in that quiet gallery, under the hum of the city and the whisper of rain, something between them began to heal. The deepest secrets are about to change everything. Subscribe now to catch the dramatic twist that is coming in the next chapter. The next morning, the gallery's doors opened to a quiet stream of visitors. Maya arrived early, her heart still unsteady from the night before. The air smelled faintly of paint and coffee. Each step echoed through the polished floor, and every echo reminded her of how far she had come from sketching alone in a cramped apartment to seeing her work under soft gallery lights. But peace never stays long when the world starts paying attention. By noon, a journalist approached her with a microphone. "Miss Torres, how does it feel to know that your success might be tied to Mr. Grant's influence?" The question hit like a slap. She forced a smile. "My work was selected on merit," she said, steady but polite. Later, She caught sight of an online article flashing across a visitor's tablet. Was the art of every day just a publicity stunt? The headline stung, and beneath it was a photo of her standing beside Elias. The comments below were worse accusations that she was using him, that he was using her. By the time Elias arrived, she was sitting alone near the exit, her shoulders tense. He noticed the look on her face and approached carefully. "You saw it, did you not?" Maya nodded without looking up. "They think I am part of some corporate show. They think I am your project again." He crouched beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "They are wrong, and you know they are." "I know," she whispered, "but knowing does not make it hurt less." He hesitated, then took out his phone. "I can make a statement, tell them the truth." She shook her head. "No, that will only make them talk more. Let the work speak for itself." Elias studied her for a long moment. There was pride in her voice, the same quiet strength that had drawn him to her from the start. "You amaze me," he said softly. "Even when the world doubts you, you stand taller." Maya looked up at him, eyes glassy but determined. "If I learned anything from you, it is that truth does not need to scream to be heard." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I am the student now." For a moment, the chaos outside, the gossip, the noise faded into silence. They stood there, side by side, no longer millionaire and artist, but two people who had both been misunderstood and still chose to keep creating. Outside, the afternoon light poured through the windows, touching the framed sketch of the rainy street, the one that had started it all. It glowed softly, like a quiet promise that even storms can lead to something beautiful. A few weeks later, the storm around the exhibit finally faded. The gossip died down, replaced by genuine praise for the work itself. Critics wrote about the emotional depth of Maya's art, calling it a portrait of humanity in motion. She read the words one morning over coffee and smiled quietly. For the first time in a long while, she felt peace, not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that grows from surviving it. Elias had kept his promise. He did not issue statements or chase headlines. Instead, he let her art and her integrity speak louder than any defense could. But he visited the gallery often, always when the crowds were thin, always with the same calm presence that had unsettled and comforted her at once. One evening near closing, she found him standing in front of her favorite piece, the sketch of the rainy street. The soft golden light touched his face, and she saw something she had not noticed before: vulnerability. "You still come here," she said gently, walking up beside him. He smiled faintly. "This place reminds me of the moment everything changed. Sometimes, when I look at this drawing, I wonder what would have happened if you had gotten into the right car that night." She laughed softly. "Then you would have kept driving, and I would still be sketching behind a coffee counter." He turned to her. "Serious now. Then I am grateful you chose the wrong door." Their eyes met, and for a moment the rest of the world disappeared. He took a slow breath, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper, a contract, but not the kind she feared. "It is not business," he said quickly. "It is a proposal. Not of marriage, at least not yet. I want to open a community art studio, a space for people like you, and I want you to run it." Maya stared at him, overwhelmed. "You are serious?" "Completely," he said. "Call it selfish, but I want to see what happens when the city starts seeing through your eyes." Her throat tightened. She tried to speak, but all she managed was a whisper. "You never stop surprising me." He smiled, softer than before. "That is the goal." For a long moment neither spoke. The rain began outside again, gentle and steady against the glass. Maya took the paper, her fingers brushing his, and felt the familiar spark that had started everything. Finally, she said, "All right, Mr. Grant, let us build something real." He met her gaze, his voice low. "Together?" She nodded. "Together." Outside, thunder rolled far in the distance, but inside the gallery there was only warmth, the kind that comes when two people stop fighting fate and start trusting it instead. And in that quiet, The wrong car from a rainy night had finally led them both exactly where they were meant to be. 6 months later, the once empty warehouse on the east side of Los Angeles had transformed into something extraordinary. Sunlight spilled through tall windows onto easels, sketch pads, and the laughter of people who had never dared to call themselves artists before. The sign above the door read, "The Art of Every Day, Community Studio." Maya stood near the entrance, helping a little boy mix paint, his small hands clumsy but determined. She smiled when he finally got the color right. "See? Sometimes mistakes make the best shades." The boy grinned, proud of himself, and she saw a reflection of who she once was scared, unsure, but still trying. Across the room, Elias watched quietly. He had traded his suit for rolled-up sleeves and a relaxed smile. Every Friday, he came to the studio to volunteer, teaching students how to use digital tools to bring their art to life. The billionaire who once hid behind boardroom walls was now kneeling beside a child, showing him how to layer light in a painting. When the class ended, Maya walked over, wiping paint from her hands. "You are getting better at this," she teased. He smiled. "It helps when the teacher is inspiring." They stood side by side, looking at the beast collection of student drawings pinned along the wall. Among them was a charcoal sketch of a rainy street, a copy of her first famous piece, drawn by one of the students. She smiled softly. "It still feels unreal, you know, how it all started with one mistake." Elias turned toward her. "Not a mistake," he said gently. "A beginning." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the soft afternoon light. "Do you ever think about that night?" "Every day," he admitted, "because it reminds me that sometimes the wrong turn takes you exactly where you need to go." She laughed quietly. "You are getting poetic, Mr. Grant." "Only when you are around," he said, his tone warm and teasing. For a moment, they simply stood there, surrounded by color, laughter, and life. The air felt different, full, peaceful, like the city itself had taken a breath and exhaled hope. Maya picked up a small sketchbook from a nearby table and handed it to him. "For you," she said. Inside was a new drawing of the studio, the students, and him standing in the light. At the bottom, she had written, "The right car was never the one that drove away. It was the one that stopped." Elias smiled, tracing the line with his thumb. "You always find the right words." "Only when they are about you," she said softly. He looked at her, and the world seemed to still. Then, without a word, he took her hand. The same hand that had once trembled when she jumped into the wrong car now rested firmly in his. Outside, the sky began to glow with the first light of evening, gold spilling across the city. Inside, the two of them walked past rows of sketches, laughter echoing behind them, knowing they had built something that would outlast both fame and fear. Maya whispered, "Who knew the wrong car could lead home?" Elias smiled. Fate always knew. And with that, they stepped into the golden dusk, two lives forever changed by one beautiful mistake. Thank you for joining us for this cinematic adventure. If you want more untold or real stories of billionaire love and redemption, please subscribe and choose your next true heart journey on your screen now.